I never planned to be a hero that day. But sometimes, life forces your hand when injustice unfolds before your eyes. The fluorescent lights of Wilson's Market buzzed overhead as I navigated the narrow aisles, my basket filled with bare essentials, ramen noodles, a loaf of bread, and some apples. My teaching salary at Westbrook Community College stretched thin by the end of each month. 3 more days until payday. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of accusation. "I know what you're doing, girl. Don't think I didn't see you." The voice belonged to a heavy-set store manager, his finger pointed directly at a young woman in a wheelchair. She couldn't have been more than 18, with chestnut hair falling across her face as she shrank into herself, trembling. Her wheelchair was old, the kind insurance companies provide when they've calculated the minimum they can spend on someone's mobility. "I didn't take anything," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the store's terrible music. "Please, I just need to get home." The manager sneered, grabbing the handles of her wheelchair. "Empty your pockets and that backpack. Now. Or I'm calling the police." People stared. Some whispered. Most just pretended not to see, suddenly fascinated by nutrition labels on canned beans. I recognized that calculated indifference. I'd faced it my entire life as a black man in spaces where people decided I didn't belong. Something snapped inside me. Before I could process my actions, I placed my shopping basket on the floor and moved toward them. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Is there a problem here?" The manager sized me up immediately, 6'2", broad-shouldered, dark skin. I saw the calculations behind his eyes, the assumptions forming. "This doesn't concern you," he said dismissively. "Mind your business." The girl looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear and something else, a silent plea. Tears trembled on her lashes. "Actually," I said, stepping closer, "I believe it does concern me when you're publicly humiliating someone without proof. She's been in here 3 times this week, always looking suspicious." His hand remained firmly on her wheelchair, a possessive grip that made my blood boil. "Looking suspicious isn't a crime," I replied. "And neither is being disabled." I knelt beside her wheelchair, bringing myself to eye level. "My name's Elijah." "What's yours?" "Sarah," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't steal anything." "I swear." "I believe you, Sarah." I stood up straight, turning to face the manager again. "Either show me some proof she's stolen something or let her go." His face reddened. "You want proof? Fine." He reached for Sarah's backpack, but I moved between them. "No. You'll wait for proper authorities if you want to search her belongings. Or she can empty them herself. You don't touch her or her things." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Other customers had stopped pretending not to watch. A security camera whirred in the corner, recording everything. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," the manager threatened. I didn't know then just how ironic his words would prove to be. "Neither do you," I replied, my voice low but firm. What happened next would change the course of my life forever. Sarah reached for my hand, her fingers cold against my skin. Something passed between us in that moment, a connection, an understanding. I had no idea that this girl in the worn wheelchair, wearing clothes from a thrift store, carried a secret that would turn my world upside down. And I had no way of knowing that standing up for her that day would lead me into the crosshairs of one of the most powerful men in the country, her father. But that's getting ahead of the story. First, I had to get Sarah safely out of this store and away from the judgment and accusations. Little did I know, I wasn't just defending a helpless young woman, I was challenging an entire system built to protect the privileged and punish the vulnerable. And the cost of that challenge would be higher than I could have possibly imagined. Before I continue, kindly subscribe to this channel. "Call the police then," I challenged the manager, whose name tag read Frank. "Let's see what they have to say about you detaining someone without evidence." Frank's eyes narrowed. "You're making a big mistake, buddy." "No, you are," I replied, standing my ground. "And I'm not your buddy." An older woman with silver hair stepped forward from the gathering crowd. I've been watching this girl the whole time. She hasn't taken a thing. Her voice quavered but held firm. You should be ashamed, Frank. Frank's face flushed deeper, caught between his suspicions and the growing public scrutiny. Store policy was probably to avoid scenes exactly like this one. Fine, he spat. But don't come back here, he warned Sarah before storming off toward the front of the store. Sarah exhaled, her shoulders slumping with relief. Thank you, she whispered, wiping away tears. I don't know what would have happened if. You don't have to thank me, I said, grabbing my abandoned shopping basket. Let me walk you out. Outside, rain had started to fall, a gentle spring shower that nonetheless posed a challenge for someone in a wheelchair. Sarah looked up at the sky with resignation, as if the weather were just one more obstacle in a world full of them. Can I help you get somewhere? I offered. She hesitated. I live at Pinewood Apartments. It's about 8 blocks from here. I knew Pinewood, subsidized housing on the edge of downtown, not exactly wheelchair accessible. That's a long way in this rain. Let me call you a ride. I can't. She started, then stopped herself. I mean, I'd appreciate it, but I can't pay you back right now. The way she said it made me pause. There was pride there, and something else, a careful way of speaking that seemed practiced, as if she was used to hiding parts of herself. No payback needed, I said, already pulling out my phone. Consider it my good deed for the day. While waiting for the ride share, we took shelter under the store's awning. Sarah kept glancing back through the windows, where Frank was still glaring at us from behind the checkout counter. Does that happen to you often? I asked gently. She nodded, fingers fidgeting with a loose thread on her worn jacket. More than you'd think. People see the wheelchair and either think I'm helpless or I'm gaming the system somehow. Her laugh was hollow. As if anyone would choose this. How long have you been? I gestured vaguely. Paralyzed? 3 years. Car accident when I was 15. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but I caught the shadow that passed over her face. My mom died. I survived, but lost everything below the waist. My heart sank. I'm sorry. Don't be. Everyone's got their struggles. She looked up at me, really studying me for the first time. What do you do, Elijah, when you're not rescuing girls from overzealous store managers? I teach African American literature at Westbrook, I said. Nothing heroic about discussing Langston Hughes with sleepy freshmen. I love Hughes, she said, surprising me. Too, is one of my favorites. I couldn't hide my smile. Mine too. Our ride pulled up, a blue sedan with a dent in the passenger door. I helped Sarah into the car, folding her wheelchair with some difficulty before placing it in the trunk. You're good at that for a first-timer, she observed as I settled into the seat beside her. Fast learner, I replied. Though I probably should have asked if you wanted company for the ride. I do, she said quickly. Then, softer, I really do. The driver navigated through rain-slicked streets as Sarah told me more about herself. She lived alone, fiercely independent, she called it with a wry smile. She was taking online classes, studying business and economics. There were gaps in her story though, careful omissions that made me curious. What about your dad? I asked as we neared Pinewood. Is he? Her face changed, closing off. Not in the picture. Not for a long time. We arrived at the apartments, a stark concrete building with a ramp that looked like an afterthought. I helped her out, set up her wheelchair, and insisted on accompanying her to her door despite her protests. Her apartment was on the ground floor, thankfully. It was small but meticulously organized, everything within reach from wheelchair height. What struck me most was the bookshelf, economics textbooks, business biographies, and financial analysis that seemed out of place in these humble surroundings. Heavy reading, I observed. She wheeled over to a small kitchenette. Would you like some tea? It's the least I can offer. I should have said no. I had papers to grade, and this was already beyond what I'd planned when stepping in at the store. But something about Sarah pulled at me, her resilience, her mystery. Tea would be great. As she prepared it, I noticed a photograph partially hidden behind a stack of books, the only personal touch in the otherwise utilitarian space. A younger Sarah, standing between a woman with her same chestnut hair and a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. They looked happy, normal. A family. My parents, Sarah said, catching my gaze. Before everything. I wanted to ask more but sensed her reluctance. Instead, I accepted the mug of tea she offered and sat on her worn sofa. Why were you at Wilson's today? I asked. I needed groceries like everyone else, she said, but her eyes flickered away. Listen, Elijah, you should know something about me. A sharp knock interrupted her. 3 hard raps that made us both jump. Sarah Matthews? Open up. Now. The voice was male, authoritative, and unmistakably angry. The color drained from Sarah's face. You need to go, she whispered urgently. Right now. Who is that? I asked, already standing. Are you in danger? No, but you might be. Her hands trembled as she took the mug from me. Please use the back door through the kitchen. Don't let him see you. Another knock, more insistent. Miss Matthews, I know you're in there. Who is he? I pressed. Sarah's eyes met mine, fear and resignation swirling in their depths. He works for my father. And my father is not someone you want to know. I stood frozen, torn between leaving her and staying to protect her from whatever was coming. Please, she begged. I'll be fine. But if he sees you here, everything gets more complicated. As the pounding continued, I made my choice, one that would set in motion events I couldn't possibly foresee, drawing me deeper into Sarah's hidden world and the powerful forces that surrounded her. Before I continue, kindly subscribe to this channel. I've never been one to leave someone vulnerable alone with a threat. My father taught me that before he was taken by cancer when I was 12. Son, he'd said, the measure of a man is what he does when no one's watching, and how he stands for those who can't stand for themselves. I'm not going anywhere, I told Sarah, moving between her and the door. Her eyes widened. Elijah, please. The door burst open before she could finish, lock splintering as a man in a tailored black suit stepped through. He was tall, built like a former athlete gone slightly soft with age and desk work. His cold eyes assessed the room, landing on me with a mixture of surprise and calculation. Ms. Matthews, he said, ignoring me completely. Your father requires your presence. Sarah's knuckles whitened around her wheelchair's armrests. I told him I'm not coming back, Clayton. The man, Clayton, sighed as if dealing with a petulant child. This situation has gone on long enough. 3 years of this experiment is sufficient. I found my voice. I don't know who you are, but you can't just break into someone's apartment and make demands. Clayton finally looked at me, his expression one of mild amusement. And you are? A friend, I said firmly. One who's about to call the police if you don't leave. I wouldn't recommend that, Clayton replied, pulling out his phone and showing me a screen filled with what looked like police dispatch codes. The authorities in this city are understanding of Mr. Matthews' needs. Sarah wheeled forward. Clayton, please. Tell my father I'm not ready. Not ready? Clayton's composure slipped for a moment. While you live in this? He gestured dismissively at the apartment. Squalor? Playing poverty tourist when you could be. That's enough. Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. Something in her demeanor shifted, a glimpse of authority that seemed to come from somewhere deep and practiced. Clayton straightened his tie, immediately deferential. Your father is ill, Sarah. He's asking for you. The news hit her hard, I could see it in the way her shoulders collapsed inward. How ill? The doctors say weeks, maybe less. Clayton's voice softened marginally. He wants to make amends. I stood there, trying to piece together what I was hearing. Sarah, this supposedly poor girl living in subsidized housing, clearly came from money, serious money. The kind that commanded respect from men like Clayton and apparently had the local police in its pocket. Is he at the estate? Sarah asked quietly. Clayton nodded. The private medical suite was set up last month. She turned to look at me, conflict written across her face. Elijah, I'm sorry. There are things I haven't told you. I gathered that, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I wasn't angry, just confused and increasingly concerned about what I'd stumbled into. Sarah took a deep breath. My real name is Sarah Matthews Harrington. My father is Richard Harrington. The name hit me like a physical blow. Richard Harrington, founder of Harrington Global Investments, a man whose wealth was measured in billions, whose name appeared on university buildings and hospital wings across the country. A man known for ruthless business tactics and political connections that reached the highest levels of government. Why are you living here? I asked, gesturing to the modest apartment. Why the secrecy? Because after the accident, after I lost my mother and my legs, I discovered who my father really was, she said, eyes flashing with a mix of pain and determination. How he made his fortune. Who he hurt along the way. Including people who look like you, Elijah. Clayton cleared his throat impatiently. This is all very touching, but we need to leave now. The car is waiting. Sarah held my gaze. After my injury, my father wanted to lock me away in our mansion with private nurses and pity. I wanted to understand the world as it really is, not filtered through privilege and power. So I left. I've been living on my own for 3 years, using my mother's maiden name. And your father let you? I asked skeptically. Clayton's bitter laugh answered before Sarah could. Let her? Mr. Harrington has had round-the-clock surveillance on her since the day she left. Security teams positioned throughout this building. Background checks on everyone she speaks to. His eyes narrowed at me. Including you, Professor Wade. A chill ran down my spine. He knew my name. How much else did they know about me? Sarah, Clayton continued, you've proven your point. Now your father is dying, and he's asking for you. Will you really deny him that? I watched the internal struggle play across Sarah's face, anger, resentment, and beneath it all, the undeniable pull of family. Even a family as complicated as hers. I'll see him, she finally said. But on my terms. And Elijah comes with me. Clayton's eyebrows shot up. That's not possible. Your father doesn't make all the decisions anymore, Sarah finished, steel in her voice. I'll come see him, but only with Elijah. He's the first person in years who's seen me, really seen me, and not as a Harrington, not as a wheelchair, just as Sarah. I need that perspective when I face my father. Clayton looked like he might argue, then thought better of it. He tapped something into his phone. Fine. The background check is adequate. No criminal record, stable employment history. He eyed me with clear disapproval. Though your financial situation is concerning. Not everyone measures worth in dollars, I said. Sarah reached for my hand. Will you come? I know it's asking a lot. It was asking a lot. I had classes to teach, a life that didn't involve billionaires and their family dramas. But there was something in Sarah's eyes, vulnerability beneath determination, that I couldn't turn away from. I'll come, I agreed, not fully understanding what I was committing to. Clayton gestured toward the door. The car is waiting. Mr. Harrington doesn't like delays. As we left the apartment, Sarah whispered to me, thank you. But Elijah, you should know my father isn't just dying. He's dangerous. And now that you're involved with me, you're on his radar. I helped her into the sleek black SUV waiting outside, wondering what exactly I'd gotten myself into, and why, despite every warning bell sounding in my mind, I couldn't bring myself to walk away from this woman I'd just met. Some connections defy logic. Some moments change your life's trajectory in an instant. As the car pulled away from Pinewood Apartments toward a world I'd only read about in newspapers, I sensed this was both. Before I continue, kindly subscribe to this channel. The journey to the Harrington estate took us from the struggling edges of the city to its pristine outskirts, where houses became mansions and then retreated entirely behind gates and private roads. We rode in silence, Sarah lost in thought while Clayton made quiet phone calls, arranging our arrival. After nearly an hour, the SUV turned onto a private road marked only by an understated H on the stone entrance pillars. The driveway stretched for what seemed like half a mile, cutting through manicured lawns and precisely placed trees before revealing the house, though house felt inadequate for the structure before us. The Harrington estate was old money made manifest, a sprawling Georgian mansion of red brick and white columns, at least 3 stories high with wings extending in both directions. It looked like it belonged on the cover of an architectural magazine or in a period drama about America's wealthiest dynasties. Home sweet home? I asked Sarah quietly. Her smile was bitter. Prison sweet prison. Clayton pretended not to hear as he held the car door open. 2 men in dark suits, security, unmistakably, appeared from nowhere to assist with Sarah's wheelchair. She waved them off. I can manage myself, she said sharply. I've been doing it for 3 years. I helped her instead, feeling the security team's eyes on me, evaluating, measuring the threat I might pose. To them, I was an unknown variable in a carefully controlled environment. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive, soaring ceilings with hand-painted details, museum-quality artwork on every wall, furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary. It was beautiful but cold, like walking through the pages of a luxury magazine rather than someone's home. A slim woman in a crisp suit approached us, tablet in hand. Ms. Harrington, welcome home. Your father is in the East Wing medical suite. He's been asking for you. Sarah's hands tightened on her wheels. Hello, Diane. This is my friend, Professor Elijah Wade. Diane barely glanced at me. Mr. Harrington has requested a private conversation with you first, Ms. Harrington. And I've requested Elijah stay with me, Sarah countered, her voice taking on that tone of natural authority again. My father will understand. Diane looked doubtful but nodded. As you wish. This way, please. We followed her through corridors lined with family photographs. I noticed something interesting. In the older photos, Sarah stood tall between her parents, her father's hand often resting proudly on her shoulder. In the more recent ones, Richard Harrington stood alone, his expression growing progressively harder, more distant. When was the last time you saw your father? I asked Sarah quietly. The day I left, she replied. 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days ago. He told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Her voice lowered further. I told him his mistake was thinking he could control me through my disability. We reached a set of double doors with a discreet keypad lock. Diane entered a code, and the doors slid open to reveal what looked like a high-end hospital suite. Medical equipment beeped quietly. A nurse stood checking monitors beside a large bed where a man lay propped against pillows. Richard Harrington had once been imposing, I could see that even now. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the same determined jawline as his daughter. But illness had hollowed him, sharpened his features into something almost predatory. His eyes, however, remained intense, intelligent and calculating even in sickness. Those eyes fixed on Sarah first with naked emotion, relief, love, regret, before hardening as they shifted to me. So, he said, his voice surprisingly strong, you've finally come home. And you've brought company. Sarah wheeled herself to her father's bedside, stopping just out of reach. This is Elijah Wade. He's a professor of African American literature at Westbrook. I know exactly who he is, Richard said, not bothering to extend his hand to me. What I don't know is why you brought him into a private family matter. Because I trust him, Sarah said simply. And there aren't many people I can say that about anymore. Richard's laugh turned into a rattling cough. The nurse stepped forward with water, but he waved her away impatiently. Trust? You've known him for what, a day? Less. Sometimes a day is enough to see someone's character, Sarah countered. He stood up for me when no one else would. Ah yes, the incident at the grocery store, Richard nodded. Our security team was 2 minutes away from intervention when Professor Wade stepped in. His gaze locked onto mine. Quite the white knight, aren't you? I just did what any decent person would do, I replied, holding his stare. And yet no one else did they? Richard looked back at his daughter. You see, Sarah? This is why I've always tried to protect you. The world is full of people who will walk past suffering if addressing it inconveniences them. Or people who cause suffering if addressing it affects their bottom line, Sarah shot back. The tension between them crackled like electricity. Years of unspoken grievances hung in the air. Richard sighed, suddenly looking every bit his illness. I didn't ask you here to argue, Sarah. I asked you here because I'm dying, and there are things that need to be said. Things that need to be arranged. Your empire? Sarah's voice was cold. I told you when I left, I don't want any part of it. Not after what I discovered. Richard's eyes flickered toward me, then back to his daughter. You still don't understand. Everything I did, everything, was to build a legacy for you. To give you power in a world that would take one look at you in that wheelchair and dismiss you. Don't you dare use my disability as an excuse for what you did, Sarah's voice shook with emotion. The communities you destroyed with those development projects. The environmental regulations you bypassed. The workers whose pensions vanished after you restructured their companies. I stood silently, pieces falling into place. Sarah hadn't just left because of her father's controlling nature, she'd discovered ethical breaches that went against everything she believed in. Richard looked at me then. Do you know what it's like, Professor Wade, to build something from nothing? To create wealth that will last generations? To secure your child's future against any possible hardship? No, I admitted. But I know what it's like to have principles that matter more than money. A flash of anger crossed his face. Easy to say when you've never had to make the hard choices. Father, Sarah interrupted, I didn't come to debate ethics with you. Clayton said you wanted to make amends. Is that true? Richard's expression softened slightly. Yes. But not in the way you might think. He pressed a button beside his bed. There's something you need to see. Something I've been working on since you left. The far wall slid open to reveal a hidden screen. It flickered to life, displaying what looked like architectural plans, followed by photographs of construction sites, community centers, and renovated housing developments. What is this? Sarah asked, wheeling closer to the screen. Redemption, perhaps, Richard said quietly. Or just good business with a conscience. Every project that you criticized, I've revisited. Every community impacted, I've reinvested in. Not publicly, that would be too easy. But substantially. Sarah stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. Why? Because you were right, Richard admitted, the word seeming physically painful for him to say. Not about everything, but enough. And because I want you to take over not the company I built, but the company it could become. The revelation hung in the air. I could see Sarah struggling with conflicting emotions, skepticism, hope, and lingering anger all warring within her. Before she could respond, Richard's body convulsed in another coughing fit, this one violent enough to bring blood to his lips. The nurse rushed forward, injecting something into his foreline as monitors began to alarm. You need to step out, the nurse ordered as more medical staff rushed in. As we were ushered from the room, I caught one last glimpse of Richard Harrington. Despite his frailty, he reached out toward his daughter with surprising strength, his eyes communicating what his failing body could not. In that moment, I saw not the billionaire titan of industry, but simply a father desperate for reconciliation with his child before time ran out. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical terminology and hushed conversations. Sarah and I waited in a luxurious sitting room while doctors and specialists came and went from Richard's suite. Her face remained impassive, but I noticed her hands trembling on the armrests of her wheelchair. "You don't have to stay," she told me after the first hour. "This isn't your battle." I pulled my chair closer to hers. "I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to." She studied my face. "Why? You barely know me. And now you've been dropped into this mess of wealth and power and family dysfunction. Most people would run." "I'm not most people," I said simply. "And something tells me you're worth staying for." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "My whole life, people have wanted something from me, in my father's money, connections, influence. You might be the first person who just wants me." Before I could respond, Diane appeared at the doorway. "Miss Harrington? Your father is stabilized. He's asking for both of you." Richard looked markedly worse than before, paler, smaller somehow against the white hospital bedding. The room had emptied of all but one nurse, who monitored his vitals from a discreet corner. "Sit," he commanded weakly, gesturing to chairs positioned beside his bed. Sarah wheeled herself into place. I took the seat beside her. "How much time?" she asked the question directly, unflinching. "Days, according to the specialists." Richard's voice was raspy but determined. "Which means we don't have time for games or grudges." "I don't consider principles a game, Father." He nodded, a hint of pride crossing his features. "Your mother would agree with you. She always was my moral compass." His eyes drifted to a photograph on the bedside table, the same woman I'd seen in the picture at Sarah's apartment. "I lost my way after she died." "That's not an excuse," Sarah said, but her voice had softened. "No, it's not," Richard agreed. "Nothing excuses what I've done. But I'm trying to make it right." He reached for a folder beside him and handed it to Sarah. "This is my new will and the restructuring plan for Harrington Global. I've been implementing it slowly for the past year." Sarah opened the folder, scanning documents with increasing disbelief. These divestments, the ethical investment guidelines, the reparation funds for affected communities. She looked up at her father. "This would cut the company's value by billions." "And make it something worth inheriting," Richard replied. "Something you could lead without compromising who you are." I watched Sarah's face as the implications settled. Her father was offering not just reconciliation but transformation, a chance to redirect one of the world's largest fortunes toward justice and repair. "Why now?" she asked. "After fighting me for so long." Richard's gaze shifted to me. "Professor Wade, would you do me the courtesy of speaking honestly about what you see in this room?" I was caught off guard. "I'm not sure what you're asking." "You're an educated man who studies power structures and systemic inequalities. You're looking at a dying billionaire trying to buy his daughter's forgiveness and secure his legacy. Tell me what you see." The request felt like a trap, but Sarah nodded encouragingly. I took a deep breath. "I see a man who accumulated wealth through means he now regrets," I began carefully. "I see a daughter who had the courage to walk away from privilege to live by her principles. And I see an opportunity for transformation that goes beyond one family." I leaned forward. "But what I don't see is whether this change comes from genuine remorse or fear of death and judgment." Richard laughed, a surprising, genuine sound. "Direct." "I appreciate that." He turned back to Sarah. "To answer your question, why now? Because you force me to see myself clearly. Living in that apartment, refusing my money, showing me you'd rather have nothing than wealth built on exploitation, it broke something in me." He reached for her hand. After a moment's hesitation, she let him take it. "I've spent 3 years watching you from afar," Richard continued. "Seeing you build a life based on merit and principle. Realizing that the daughter I raised became a better person than the father who raised her." Sarah's composure cracked, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted to hate you. I just couldn't be part of it anymore." "I know." Richard squeezed her hand. But now I'm offering you a chance to be part of something different. The reformation of Harrington Global. Not as my puppet, but as its conscience. I watched a transformation come over Sarah, the weight of anger lifting, replaced by something more complex: responsibility, possibility, purpose. I don't know if I can forgive everything, she said honestly. I'm not asking for that, Richard replied. I'm asking you to finish what you started when you walked away. Force this company to become what it should be. He turned to me again. And you, Professor Wade? What do you want in all this? The question startled me. I'm just here to support Sarah. No one is just anything in my experience, Richard countered. You stood up for my daughter without knowing who she was. You've stayed beside her through all this. I suspect you'll have a role to play in whatever comes next. Before I could respond, Richard was seized by another coughing fit. The nurse rushed forward, signaling that our time was up. As we left the room, Sarah reached for my hand. He likes you, she said, sounding surprised. How can you tell? He didn't try to buy you off or threaten you. For my father, that's practically a blessing. In the hallway, Clayton waited with Diane, both looking grim. The doctors say tonight will be critical, Clayton informed us. You should stay, Ms. Harrington. We've prepared your old suite. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Elijah needs a place too. The guest wing is available, Diane replied smoothly. That night, I stood at the window of an opulent guest room larger than my entire apartment, trying to process everything that had happened since I stepped into that grocery store. Outside, rain pelted the immaculate grounds of the estate, the garden lights creating halos in the darkness. A soft knock at my door broke through my thoughts. Sarah waited on the other side, her wheelchair framed by the hallway light. I couldn't sleep, she said simply. I invited her in, and she wheeled herself to the window where I'd been standing. When I was a child, I used to watch the rain from my bedroom window and make up stories about where all that water had been before, she said. My mother told me it had traveled the world, that the same drops might have fallen on a marketplace in Morocco or a temple in Japan. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. Sarah turned to face me. What do you think I should do, Elijah? About my father's offer. I sat down so we were at eye level. I think you already know. Tell me anyway. Please. I think you have an opportunity that few people ever get, to transform a system from the inside with the full authority to make real change. I took her hand. You left because staying meant compromise. Now you can return without compromising your values. She studied our intertwined fingers. And what about you? Where do you fit in all this? It was the question I'd been avoiding since we arrived at the estate. In less than 24 hours, I'd stepped from my ordinary life into Sarah's extraordinary one. Whatever connection we'd formed felt real, but also fragile against the backdrop of her world. I don't know, I admitted. I just know I want to see where this goes. Between us, I mean. Sarah's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. I'd like that too. The next morning brought news we'd both anticipated and dreaded. Richard Harrington had passed away peacefully in the early hours. The mansion transformed overnight into a command center of lawyers, executives, and family representatives Sarah hadn't seen in years. Through it all, she remained steady, her grief tempered by the purpose her father had left her. I stayed by her side as she navigated the immediate aftermath, witnessing her transformation from Sarah Matthews, the independent student in a worn wheelchair, to Sarah Harrington, heir to a global empire she was determined to remake. 3 days later, after the private funeral, we stood in Richard's study, now Sarah's. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the estate, while walls of books surrounded a massive desk where generations of Harrington men had directed their business affairs. It's strange, Sarah said, her wheelchair positioned behind the desk. A week ago, I was stretching my student loans to make rent. Now I'm one of the wealthiest women in the country. Does it change how you feel? About what you want to do? She shook her head. If anything, it strengthens my resolve. I meant what I told my father, I'm going to transform Harrington Global. Use its resources to repair the communities it's harmed. Create something that generates prosperity without exploitation. She wheeled herself around the desk to where I stood. But I need help, Elijah. People I can trust who understand both worlds, privilege and struggle. People who'll tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. People like me. I asked, beginning to understand. Exactly like you, she confirmed. I'm establishing an ethics committee with real power, oversight of all major company decisions. I want you to lead it. The offer took my breath away. Sarah, I teach literature. I have no experience in corporate governance. You have something more valuable, integrity and perspective. The technical details can be learned. She took my hands in hers. Think about what you could accomplish. The changes you could influence. The good you could do. I thought about my students, my modest teaching career. It was meaningful work, but limited in scope. What Sarah offered was a chance to help reshape one of the world's influential corporations from the ground up. I'd have to leave my teaching position, I said, thinking aloud. Not necessarily. We could work around your schedule. Or endow a chair at Westbrook that gives you more flexibility. She smiled at my expression. That's how wealth works, Elijah. It creates possibilities. Dangerous possibilities, I cautioned. The same power that can do good can corrupt. Which is why I need you, she said simply. To help me remember who I am and what matters. Standing there in that opulent study, looking into Sarah's determined eyes, I made my decision, one that would alter the course of both our lives in ways neither of us could fully anticipate. Yes, I said. I'll help you. But on one condition. Name it. That we keep each other honest. That neither of us forgets where we started, you in that grocery store, wrongly accused and alone, me with nothing but the conviction to stand up for what's right. Sarah's eyes shimmered with emotion. I promise. 1 year later, I stood beside Sarah at the ribbon cutting for the first Harrington Community Development Center, built in the same neighborhood where I'd first met her. The center would provide job training, childcare, and resources for the community that had once felt the negative impact of Harrington Global's business practices. As cameras flashed and community members applauded, I watched Sarah address the crowd, confident, passionate, and utterly genuine. The journey had not been easy. We'd faced resistance from board members, skepticism from the public, and the constant challenge of reforming a system designed to prioritize profit above all else. But we'd also found something neither of us expected that day in the grocery store, a partnership built on shared values and growing love, a chance to create meaningful change, and the discovery that sometimes, the most powerful act is simply standing up for someone who needs it. Sarah caught my eye from the podium and smiled, the private smile she reserved just for me. In that moment, I understood that while Richard Harrington's legacy of wealth had created the opportunity, it was Sarah's courage and conviction that would truly transform it into something worthy of inheritance. And I, who had only intended to help a stranger in need, found myself inheriting something equally precious, a purpose larger than myself, and a love that had begun with a simple act of standing up for what was right. Thank you so much for following Elijah and Sarah's journey from that fateful day in the grocery store to the beginning of their shared mission to transform Harrington Global. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories that explore courage, connection, and the power of standing up for others. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Has someone ever stood up for you when you needed it most? Or have you been the one to take a stand? Your experiences and reflections mean the world to me.